So this is an area of the game we should practice more of, the short irons, the wedges. But how many of you have considered getting fit for a wedge? We're all aware of lofts on golf clubs and the degree of loft and the more lofted clubs, how they elevate the ball. But on wedges, how many of you considered the bounce angle? Some of you probably not even aware what a bounce angle is. Let's have a little chat inside, talk about bounce angles, get you familiar with that, so that when you buy a set of wedges, you know what to go for. So it was Gene Sarazen who was given the appraisal by his fellow professionals for designing the bounce angle on a golf club. Sarazen had been having flying lessons from Howard Hughes, and they'd been discussing aerodynamics and how the actual flaps on the wing of the plane would disperse the air, either when it was taking off or coming into land. And he liked that principle, and he wondered if he could apply it to a golf club. So what he did was weld a piece of solder onto the back of the golf club here on the sole. So when the club was actually being used in a bunker, the back edge of that club would hit the ground first, or hit the sand first, particularly clearing a passage for that leading edge to glide through and underneath the ball. Ball would pop up nicely, no digging, bounce angle was born, and the modern day wedges we see today have copied that principle. So over the last sort of 15 to 20 years, golf club lofts have become a lot stronger. So manufacturers have sort of capitalised on this and created space towards the wedge end of the set, putting a whole matrix of different iron options in there for people to choose, and it can get quite complicated. So my advice to you, if you are going to get a wedge fitting, go to a PGA Professional, seek out some advice, let the PGA Pro check out your swing, have a look and see what your actual angle of attack is on the ball. That can affect how we choose the clubs as well. So lots of different things have to be considered. You might be what we call a digger, where you have a steep angle of attack on the ball. You might be somebody who's shallows the club into the ball and is a sweeper, so that angle of attack is much shallower. The arc of the club into the ball is much shallower. So again, there's lots of different choices there to choose from, and it's not just the actual bounce angle we're looking at relative to the actual person's swing. We've also got to consider actual turf conditions. So if you're playing a course which is very lush, very grassy, it might be a case that you need a lot more bounce on your golf clubs. If you're playing at a seaside course, one that burns out a lot in the summer, you might find that you're going to be better off with a shallower bounce on the golf club. So all these things have to be taken into consideration. I remember when I moved to Cornwall, and I'd been at Woburn Golf Club, which was a very lush forest-lined course, and my bounce angles and my wedges were quite steep. They were quite steep angles, so I used that bounce to my advantage off that soft turf to let the club glide through and underneath the ball. Now, when I started working at Trevose Golf Club, it was a very dry summer, the first summer I was there, and the first few rounds I was going out onto the course, and I just couldn't believe how poor I was around the green. Balls were skidding through the greens, I was bellying the ball with the leading edge of the club, and what was actually happening is the bounce angle was ricocheting off the turf into the ball, causing the issue. So straight away I was on the phone to the Titleist rep, and I was changing my wedges, so I was getting my wedges suiting to that particular course. My angle of attack on the ball is pretty normal, it's not too steep, not too shallow, so I just went for something which suited the golf course, and that was something which is shallow bounce angles. You might have a course where you need something in between. There are so many variables, and you might find that you play one course one week and you might have a competition on another course. Typically in Cornwall, where we have forest line courses and seaside links courses, that can also affect really the type of clubs that you should be using. And you notice this when the American pros come over from the PGA Tour and play in the Open Championship, so they play a lot of lush courses out in America, but when they come over to the British Isles on those seaside links, the turf is completely different. So their set of wedges that they're probably going to be using over here will be a completely different set to the ones they're using at home. So before I go too deep into those thoughts about bounce angles and grind angles on wedges, seek out advice from a professional, get yourself fitted correctly, get clubs that are going to suit you, going to suit the course you play on and make you a better player. The convex shape of the spoon is very much like a bounce angle. If we compare the knife going into the butter here, it's like a golf club without a bounce. Look how the spoon just simply glides across the surface of the butter. So the bounce angle is there to be used as our friend. It'll help us get through that sand. It'll help us with our short game. Let's use the bounce as our friend. I love that contact, that tone of the ball off the club face. It sounds completely different to that shot which is thudding into the back of the ball with the leading edge. Sort of clips off, it's a nice click. Really know that I've got the bounce angle working to my advantage. Oh, I love it. God, these are horrible. Can I do these again? Sorry, I spoke. What? Variations available these days. It's worth considering before you make that purchase. Anyway, let's go inside, have a little bit of talk about bounce angles. Hello. You always invade, don't you? Come to play.